It is Thursday, February 29th, the leap day of 2024, and you are watching and listening to the MMA Eco Live podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Chris Presnell, owner of MMA Ecosystem, have worked for lots of MMA media sites, worked as a manager, currently work for Tapology as well. Been all over the place, longtime MMA fan. Glad to have you with me today as I run down the Asian MMA schedule, cover MMA, Asian MMA news, and then take your questions. If you have not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. That way you will be the first to know about upcoming videos. I have a video, I just finished it minutes ago, my Song Yadong versus Pyotr Yan video, breaking down the storylines, the different ways that this fight could go, trying to break things down. Everything you would ever want to know about this fight, I try to touch on it. Very complex fight to get into, a lot of different variables with it, but hope you enjoy it. That should be coming your way tomorrow. Folks, UFC 299 is just over a week away. Can you believe it? I feel like all of the hype and conversation around UFC 300 has really kind of buried UFC 299. And it's so hard to believe that it's literally just, 9 days away until we get all these crazy fights. So really looking forward to that. Of course, the Song Yadong versus Pyotr Yan fight. Before that, there is lots more Asian MMA to come. I'll get into one championship, get into everything else that's going on this weekend. But if you have not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do so. Appreciate that. Let's talk about 166 going down from Doha, Qatar. I'm going to show you the card and we can kind of run through at least the MMA fights on here. Very interesting card. You probably saw that that the Stamp Fairtex Denise Zambawanga fight has been dropped from the card. Not really sure why that was. There originally was supposed to be 5 title fights on this card. The grappling title fight and the Stamp Fairtex title fight have been dropped. Not really sure the reason for that. I always thought that Stamp versus Denise was an odd fight to put on a Qatar show. Two fighters from Southeast Asia fighting women. I mean, nothing against women fighting in the Middle East. I obviously don't have a problem with that, but it didn't really seem like the market for that fight. But either way, one wanted to put 5 title fights on this show. That has been moved per Sportskeeda, Nick Atkin. That Stamp versus Denise title fight has been moved to the main event of the next numbered 1 show. That's 167. That's going to go down June 8th from Bangkok, Thailand, although not in the Lumpini Stadium. That's going to go down in the Impact Arena, about a 10,000 seat arena in Thailand. So that has been moved. Nevertheless, we have 3 rematches in the 3 title fights on the card. I definitely believe this was the biggest event that one could put together for March 1st, 2024. Does it have the feel of like a super card? I don't feel like it, even though there are multiple title fights. All 3 of these title fights are rematches. All of them we've gotten fairly recently, especially the Malikan DeRitter fight. Got something interesting around it for Malikan being a triple weight champion. Luke Thomas pointed this out. It's honestly kind of more like a heavyweight and cruiser. Like Malikan, obviously one's middleweight division is 205 pounds. So it's kind of more like a heavyweight going for a light heavyweight belt and then a cruiserweight belt thrown in there as well. Not saying it's not impressive, but not totally like what we think of as middleweight, light heavyweight, and heavyweight. But nevertheless, interesting that he's going for that 3rd belt. Honestly, like there's really no one in these like middle divisions, like light heavyweight and middleweight at one championship. So having a champion over 3 weight classes is totally acceptable, honestly. So yeah, hard. It's tough out for Rainier de Ritter. Exactly the same thing that he did to Ong La and Song is now happening to him, where Ong La was champion of multiple divisions, and then de Ritter came and one by one took all of his belts, and now Malikan is doing the exact same thing. He took de Ritter's light heavyweight belt, now coming for his middleweight belt. Their first fight, somewhat one-sided, and I expect the same thing. I also kind of feel the same way around the Brooks and Pasio fight. I mean, Pasio is a very good fighter, but I think Brooks probably going to use his wrestling to win this fight. Once again, the Tong Kai versus Tan Lei fight is probably the title fight that I'm looking forward to most. I think that it'll still go the way of Tong Kai. I think that guy is always leveling up. He's still young and honestly one of the most, if not the most underrated Chinese fighter right now. But Tan Lei is so good. He's so technical. And I think that'll probably be a really excellent fight as well. Arjun Bowler versus Amir Ali Akbari, really interesting fight. I feel like it really favors Ali Akbari, just considering Bowler typically, like, if he's going to win a fight, it's with his wrestling. But Ali Akbari is also a really good wrestler, but hits like a truck. So heavyweight fights are sometimes hard to predict just because of the unpredictability of the knockout power for each fighter. But I think probably Ali Akbari will win this fight. And then most likely, I would think he's next in line for Anatoly Malikan at heavyweight. Otherwise, there was a couple fights that fell through, and they have replaced them with a lot more Middle Eastern talent, or a Turkish guy, Moroccan guy on there. Really, the only other MMA fight is that opening fight, Keito Yamakita versus Jeremy Miyamoto. Really interesting for Yamakita, considering he just fought on the Tokyo show at the end of January. So he has a very quick turnaround fighting Jeremy Miyamoto. That should be an interesting fight as well. All right, so there's one championship, 166. That is going down. Well, a couple things have changed with this card. Originally, it was supposed to be a pay-per-view card, but now it is going to be broadcast on one's YouTube channel. So they're making this event for free, which is great news for fans. I just wonder if this was like, since it took a couple hits, lost 2 of its top 5 title fights, if maybe they decided that they weren't going to get very strong pay-per-view numbers for this guy. And honestly, like, they just felt like very, very few people were going to end up watching this event, which deserves a lot more eyeballs. The other interesting thing for this show, which I'm really interested to see what the fan reception is for this event. Things are interesting in the Middle East. As far as I know, this is the biggest MMA event that has ever taken place in Qatar. We've now had several MMA events, high-profile MMA events in the UAE with the UFC in Abu Dhabi. We had last weekend we had the PFL versus Bellator show in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. The UFC shows have had pretty good fan engagement. Like, if you listen to the shows, fans are really loud, really engaged, full arenas. The PFL show last weekend was just totally flat. Almost felt like an Apex card where there's very little, the fans really not making much noise. Every time it would cut to the audience, just people swiping on their phones. Very, for being a sold out crowd, a pretty flat audience in attendance. So I'm interested to see what this is like in Qatar. I believe this is like a 10,000 seat arena, the Lusail, is it called Lusail Sports Arena? I think it's like a 10,000 seat arena, and they have it like blocked off probably to open up about 2/3 of the arena. So half of it is walled off, probably just so they can fill it out a little bit more. I mean, 10,000 for somewhere like Qatar, it's not a UFC event, really optimistic. So, yeah, interested to see how that will go. I know they have been giving out a lot of free tickets for this show as well. I did see that that Google form being passed around on Twitter. So this is a really important show for One Championship. Kind of flying under the radar, but I don't know what the realist truth is, but there have been at least rumors that there's been some fractures between the relationship between One Championship and the Qataris. I'm going off of an article by Deal Street Asia that reported that. And for One Championship, it's almost like they need to create an event with as much buzz as possible. They want to get as many fans in there as they can. They want this to look like a big, fun event. They don't want things to fall flat. So yeah, honestly, this is a great show to give away those free tickets, to expose it to as many people as possible, and try to get a buzz going. I do think it'll probably be, at least the MMA fights seem like they should all be really entertaining, action-packed fights. But I don't know really what's at stake with One Championship here. I'm just a guy living over here in the United States. I don't really have connections to know what's going on behind closed doors. But obviously, if this does not go well for One Championship, it's like, are the Qataris, how committed to One Championship are they? I don't know. They may be very committed. Everything's good. But that'll be something to watch. Just, how is this received? What's the fan engagement? All of that. So, all right, let's move on. One Pride Fight Night also has an event this weekend. They've got 2 title fights at the show. The first title fight is Gugun Guzman. He's going to be fighting Mario Satyamirawan, who they've fought once before, and I think Gugun Guzman won a unanimous decision, but they are having a rematch. Guzman, a Road to UFC alum, he's held that belt with One Pride for quite a long time. The main event of the show, another Road to UFC alum, which I think there's a lot riding on this fight. Honestly, maybe the biggest fight right now that could be made in Indonesia between Windry Patalima, the welterweight champion, and the interim champion, Sandi Pramana. I kind of toyed with like Sandi Pramana maybe getting a shot at Road to UFC this year, but they're fortunately able to fit in this title fight right at the beginning of March. I think the winner of this fight will be a very strong candidate for Indonesia to be in Road to UFC. Patalima has won once. He fought with Brave last fall and won a fight with Brave when they came to Jakarta. So if he wins this, that'll be 2 wins since his last appearance on Road to UFC. So really big fight for both guys, and I'm not really sure who to pick or how it's going to go, but Patalima has definitely had the resources available to him of the Cage Warriors Academy. He's also been at Bali MMA quite a bit, so I think he'll be ready to go. So there you have One Pride Fight Night 77 going down this Saturday from Jakarta. Believe it airs 10 a.m. Eastern and 7 a.m. Pacific, airing on One Pride's YouTube channel. Speaking of Indonesia, another event going down this weekend, Canggu Fight Night 29, an event put on by Bali MMA. Going to show you this fight card because these guys they've been putting on solid events for a while. They bring in a lot of Asian talent, a lot of guys from Bali MMA. What I like about this show is that they not only have brought in a lot of Indonesian, sometimes they're a lot more international. This show feels like they've got a lot more Indonesians on the card. You can see there. They've also got a handful of Indian fighters, which you probably may have heard. There's a lot of Indian fighters that train out of on the island of Bali. A lot of them at Soma Fight, which is just around the corner from Bali MMA. So that's kind of cool. They've got 3 fights featuring Indian versus Indonesian fighters. Overall, 4 Indian fighters as a whole. Another guy that I'm really glad to see is this guy, this Burmese guy, Punya Sai, training out of, he's got a Bali MMA shirt, but says he trains at Soma Fight. Maybe I'll need to look into that. But This guy fought with one Warrior Series back in the day, and he's making his first appearance in 4.5 years. That's interesting. I always wondered what happened to this guy, but he's finally coming back. He went 4-0 with one War Series, coming back against Kushal Vias, who's not a good record there, but he has fought all over the place. He pops up like every month in a different country to fight. So at least a very experienced guy. I think it's a good opponent for him to come back against. Really not a whole lot of experience in his first 4 fights. So I think this is a good test for him. But yeah, let's see. He's still only just 25 years old, Punya Sai. So he could be a prospect to look at depending on his performance in this fight. But yeah, other than that, you've got in the main event, you've got Masato Nakamura fighting Ryan Robertson, 2 veterans there. Got Philippines represented, India, Indonesia, and then even France opening things up there. So mostly MMA card, a couple Muay Thai fights that probably aren't on here, but yeah, lots of guys from India and Indonesia kind of starting their careers. Very cool. All right, let us now go to a couple other events. We've got take that off there. Couple other events. Gladiator 25 goes down this Saturday from Osaka, Japan. Mainly the guy that I'll bring to your attention there is Lee Sung Chol, who is a really young Korean fighter. A lot of finishes to his record. Signed by Iridium Management. I would think perhaps probably not road to UFC this year, but definitely someone to look at, especially if he keeps winning. He is fighting in like a flyweight tournament with Gladiator Championship, and this is the semifinal round. So if he wins this, he's going to go on to the finals, which will probably be late summer. Gladiator 25 going down this Saturday from Osaka, Japan. Lots of Korean and, of course, Japanese fighters. Shooto has an event that's airing live on their YouTube channel on Sunday. Alash Pride FC 95 goes down this Sunday. You kind of find out about these cards pretty late, just like a week or two in advance, but a lightweight championship between Rustam Kuday-Berganov against Rustenbek Nurjanov is in the main event. Otherwise, a lot of guys kind of starting out with their careers on that. Also on Sunday, there's an event going down in China, Cun MMA. No one really that I'm going to bring to your attention just yet on that card, but a lot of Chinese fighters going down there. It kind of seems like a lot of the frequency of Chinese events has started to slow down a little bit. Not really sure what is behind that. But last weekend, speaking of Chinese fighters, JCK traveled to Yerevan, Armenia to fight in the mixed fight promotion. So it was a bunch of Chinese guys against a bunch of Armenians. I think overall they went 6-2. So they performed really well. All the fighters did great. If you're looking for the results on that, as far as I know, the only place I found for results are this guy's website, MMAecosystem.com. I've got all the results down there. Not really any like stoppage times because the event is going to air in its completion, but this Saturday. But I was able to go through WeChat, find each fight, and find the results for each. So I did post those on my website. Check those out. But yeah, overall they did great. Aping Shala won. Naartai Kazabayi won. Asurkarbai Jinan Sabieka won. I think the guys that lost were Zhang Yu He got submitted, and then who else lost? Bidalia also lost, but all the other Chinese guys won. The thing that was really unfortunate about this event was Tsai Shongshong was supposed to fight against an Armenian guy. So these two guys make weight. They go to face off. They're just kind of staring each other down. And then this Armenian guy, I don't know if you guys saw the video yet. I meant to post it on my socials, but this Armenian guy literally clocks Tsai Shongshong with a right hook at the stare downs and like knocks Tsai unconscious at the stare downs. Totally just horrible situation. And just like, I mean, how dumb do you have to be, honestly? I mean, I guess the guy just really didn't want to fight. Is the only explanation I can think of, because you have to think, like, if you do that, you're going to be disqualified. You're not going to get your money. But it's like, if you really didn't want to fight, then why didn't you just like throw the fight? You know, it's like you could have at least gotten paid with your fight. I'm trying to find okay. I thought Tsai Shungshong posted it on his Instagram story, but I don't know if I can show that to you guys. Yeah, I think that is, maybe I'll post it on my socials, but really wacky scenario. That guy got, you know, obviously like disqualified. He got banned from the promotion. Mixed Fight put out a big apology. Tsai, I think, got his win money as well. So, fortunately, Tsai is okay, but I'm just like, literally, what are you thinking? Are you on drugs? Terrible situation. Other MMA news that has transpired in the last week. Yesterday, the UFC's Weibo account posted Liang Na will fight against Ivana Petrovic on April 27th at the UFC Apex. Honestly, shocked and not shocked that they're giving Liang Na another chance. All of her fights have been really exciting, and she fights really aggressively. And so that's the side where I'm like, I'm not surprised the UFC is giving her another chance. She's also a UFC PI athlete. So, yeah, not really sure what to make out of that. Obviously, I feel like she probably joined the UFC a little bit too soon, or at least like she probably should have been cut, fight on the regional scene, and then tried to make her way back. But either way, we're getting it. And, you know, obviously if she loses this, she's got to be out of the promotion. No one survives 4 straight losses unless you're Tony Ferguson. Noelle Grandjean, this is one championship on March 8th. This is one fight night 20 in Bangkok. Noelle Grandjean will fight Victoria Souza. Honestly, a pretty good fight in one's atomweight division. I think Noelle Grandjean has a lot of potential. Really good judo fighter, really strong and athletic. Trains at, I think, Southside MMA or Bangkok Phuket Fight Club. Sorry, I feel like she's hopped around a little bit, but I think she's got a lot of potential. Also, it was official March 22nd. Feng Tian Hao is going to fight Zhou Kun for the WLF Flyweight Championship. Feng Tian Hao, one of the top prospects out of China, young, really talented guy, really long win streak. Big things ahead of him if he keeps winning. And then Road FC announced that on April 15th or 13th, the same day as UFC 300, Kim Tae-in is going to be fighting Taisei Sakino for the heavyweight belt. Not a lot of heavyweight championships that you see going down in Asia featuring Asian fighters. So Kim Tae-in is 4-0, fights out of South Korea. I think he's a pretty solid prospect. He's finished most of his fights really quickly. So interested to see him compete for a belt. I think that is it. I think that's our Asian MMA news for today. Let's get to your questions. I am going to have to cut this off a little bit short, probably at the top of the hour. So I'll just try to get through as many questions as I can. Jersey Lee, I've been here before. Welcome. Really like your website. Will you be posting your videos from your channel to your website? I will. Yeah, I definitely will soon, for sure. Have I seen Weasel's psychoanalyzing what coaches say for content? I mean, Weasel's he's a little bit wacky. So, you know, you're gonna get what you're gonna get with him. Doesn't surprise me at all that he's probably a little off the rails with that. Yeah. South China Morning Post said the reason the fight got rescheduled is so that they can film season 3 of, oh gosh, guys. you put these fighters through a whole training camp. I know when that fight got called off, Nick Atkin had said that the fight had been off for a while, but like that's, I feel like that is a really frustrating reason. I'm guessing, are they going to be like coaching on the One Apprentice series? They're going to try to build them up almost like an Ultimate Fighter thing. Yeah, that's a little bit weird to me, why you would announce the fight, they're starting their training camps, and then you pause it for that, and willingly like taking a hit to the Qatar show. One Apprentice, see, we're still doing this. I don't get the, I mean, I feel like the One Apprentice thing, it's literally just like it's a billboard for corporate sponsors. Like, the viewership for those shows, especially the second season, have been like really, really, really bad. But it's just like, I feel like the Apprentice show, for One's relationship with Qatar, is literally just something to try to like make a deal. A lot of, especially for the Middle East, like when you're making deals with these countries, with these like sovereign wealth funds, a lot of it's driven by tourism. So it's the MMA promoter saying, how can we help drive tourism to your country? Well, hey, we'll make a reality show set in Qatar so people can see Qatar, showcase a couple sponsors, things like that. And it's just like a bargaining chip in a business deal. It's not, and I haven't seen the show. I can't say whether it's something I would be drawn to watch. But I don't know. I don't know why they are so hooked on that strategy. The other thing with the Apprentice, and I know this is a little bit cynical, but I feel like part of One Championship and Chautri's image as a whole is presenting himself as like this uber super amazing, like brilliant businessman. And I feel like these One Apprentice shows are part of like a little bit of brand building for him, because it puts him in like the, I mean, literally like the Donald Trump seat from the original Apprentice show. So I don't know. But it doesn't matter if anyone watches it. I don't know. I know that's a cynical take, but yeah. 3 dead weight classes. They should just merge them if Anatoly wins. Honestly, they should especially merge middleweight and light, at the very least. Like, if you guys watch the video I posted at the beginning of the year, like it's not just that there's no one on a win streak, no one eligible to fight for a title fight, but there's like actually no one on the roster for middleweight and light heavyweight. It's like a dead division. Like there's one fighter in it, or 2 fighters, Malikin and DeRitter. Welterweight, not that much better, a little bit better, but heavyweight has a little bit more life in it. But yeah, definitely, I would say just like make a cruiserweight division, or like call it cruiserweight. Make it, gosh, what is it for One Championship? 205 to 225. I don't even know. Yeah, there's no point at this point. It's literally just an optics thing, so we can have 3 belts, so we can call someone a 3-weight champion. But I mean, we all know it doesn't mean, it's just cutting different amounts of weight, which, yeah, there's that's great, but I don't know. It is what it is. Y'all know my thoughts. Is Malikin a tough fight for Ngannou? I feel that beating Stipe and Gon are better than any win Malikin has ever had. I would probably pick Ngannou over Malikin at this point, but I don't know. It's hard to tell when Malikin, like, he has smashed every single opponent in One Championship, especially his recent opponents. But it's like I need to see him against more. It's like he's fought Arjun Bowler. He's fought, what was that guy's name? I forget. Kirill Gershenko, who just had a few fights to his record. and then he's fought DeRitter. I mean, those wins look really good, but it's just like there's hardly any like top tier heavyweights in one championship. But skill wise, he does look like I think that it would not be a blowout, but I think that Ngannou would probably win that fight, but I don't know. That's a fight that could have upset written all over it. Malikan pushes a hard and fast pace, but Ngannou would be a much bigger guy, and I think I don't think anyone hits harder than Ngannou does. So that would be an incredible fight. Maybe like the best, that for me is like the best heavyweight fight outside of the UFC right now. Honestly, the one that I'm most excited for. I mean, are we really getting excited? Renan Fajeda versus Francis Ngannou would be a fine fight. I think that could be really exciting. But apart from that, like there's really not much out there that really gets me excited. Maybe Vadim Nemkov. That would be actually probably a really good fight too. But personally, Malikan, just that guy just is like pure adrenaline, just like constant forward pressure, and is a sledgehammer. So I really do like Malikan. I just feel like it's unfortunate that there's just not there's not a lot of like top fighters for him to fight and test himself against. So, one championship is probably trying their hardest to keep him in the organization. I would imagine one of the most highly paid athletes on the MMA side in their organization. But yeah, will be interesting to see how that unfolds after he fights DeRitter, if he wins. No clever pun today, but what did you think of Brian Ortega falling for the 70-year-old Eagle story meme that bodybuilders use to motivate people? I asked this on Sound and Pound. Drake and Alex cannot stop laughing. Yeah, what was that? It was like something about like I briefly know what you're talking about, but it doesn't surprise me. That was pretty funny, but yeah. I don't totally remember that, but it makes sense for something that would happen in MMA. How funny is it that this weekend's UFC card is infamously the one Saudis boycotted and sent to the Apex? It is such a weird event. This Saturday, and I'm gonna have to miss out. I'm going on a trip with some friends this weekend, but such a weird card. I almost like there's almost like a weird intrigue growing around the main event, just because like this main event has been panned so hard by everyone as being like the worst main event ever. But it's almost like those movies that are like, it's so bad, it's good. And I feel like because people are talking so much about it, people are talking about it. And so it's almost like there's a little bit of buzz behind it. Shamil Gaziev has like kind of come out of his shell a little bit this week and said some really funny things. And like, he posted that image of himself next to the poster, where he's on the poster, he's looking over at Rosenstrike, and then he's making the exact same pose on the opposite side. And it was just a really funny image, and low-key just like a really weird event. Overall, yeah, I think it is really funny that it's like exactly what you said. The Saudis didn't want it, and it just got shipped off to the Apex halfway around the world. Really, I feel like one of the main conversation points right now is what is going to be the main event of UFC 301, now that the original main event in Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill, which would have been an incredible main event, a perfect main event for that Rio de Janeiro show. But they had to move it over to 300 to give it something worthy of a main event. So now it's like, okay, I even went through, yesterday I went through my whole UFC roster, and I was like, okay, what Brazilian fighters could possibly step in? Like, which ranked Brazilian fighters are available for this show? And I wrote down a couple names, but there's really all the top guys are booked in shows like UFC 300, UFC 299. One option that we could see, I know I'm like drifting off your point here. I do think if we see Alex Pereira win really quickly, that they could turn him around for 301. I do think that. But this weekend, the fight between Muhammad Mokaev and Alex Perez, I think if Mokaev goes out there, especially gets a finish, which, let's be honest, he hasn't really been one to finish a lot of people. But if he were to get some really impressive win over Alex Perez, you could be looking at your UFC 301 main event with him versus Alexandre Pantoja. Probably not the main event that will get fans super excited, but it's a Brazilian fighter with a title fighting in the main event. Sorry, I looked like my screen might be skipping a little bit. Maybe it's just my browser. Okay. Got a lot of questions on here. I'm going to try to just kind of, are the UA, try to get as many as I can. Qatar fight card needs a Muay Thai title fight. I agree. Are UAE and Saudi Arabia competing in this sports washing thing? That's bad, right? I think sports washing is a thing, but I think tourism is maybe one of the top guiding forces here too. It seems like between these three Middle Eastern countries, Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, I think tourism is a big, big part of what's driving this. So sports washing, I definitely think it is a thing, but I don't think it's like necessarily the main like evil plan behind a lot of these events. Kareem Zidane he's pivoted a little bit from using that term, sports washing, I think because he sees it as a little bit more complex than that, and I agree. So check out his work for that. Good for the fans, bad for the political people. I read a really good article by Kareem Zidane that explains how extremists are using MMA counterculture mystique to radicalize disenfranchised young men and provide them a shared space to spread hate. Does the UFC do this by profiting off hate? I think in a soft way, yes. I think they do. What I'm seeing, and I'm not trying to make a whole lot of commentary, I'm just stating what I observe. What I'm seeing is more and more like MMA or MMA tangential personalities bringing in like a political slant on things, or the UFC, not necessarily as a brand, but figures within the UFC aligning themselves with like far right or conservative, news out. Whether it's Tucker Carlson or like the Nelk boys have also started to lean like, or at least like show a lot of like far right allegiances and messaging as well, which has been really surprising to me. But I think it's just it's part of the bigger stream. And the UFC, the UFC is so interesting because like at the surface they want to present themselves as this really like postmodern brand for everybody, showcasing fighters of all their different countries and being a friendly place for the LGBTQ community. They've got those t-shirts with the rainbow on it, but like, so it's like the brand itself tries to be a lot more wide reaching, but a lot of the personalities within it oftentimes really align themselves that way. And so, yeah, I mean, I would love to talk about this for an hour. I think about this a lot, but I do think it is part of the greater narrative of radicalizing, which doesn't necessarily mean turning people into like a violent extremist. I think it just means like drifting one way or the other on the political spectrum. So I think it does do that. And at the same time, I think that messaging probably keeps out people of a more diverse group of political affiliations. So what you're left with is more of a right-leaning fan base. Totally. Yeah, a lot of questions about sports washing. Everyone here seems to talk about sports washing when it comes to the Middle East and combat sports, but it seems like fans are given two choices: promotions, money laundering, and mob involvement, or sports washing. And to be honest, Saudi Arabia has done a couple bad things in the past, but the quality of the cards they're putting together boxing wise, I'm willing to forgive them for. Yeah, I think I always want to be really careful to immediately judge, like, if there are people out there who are just like, hey, all I want to do is just tune in for the fight. I want to watch the fight, and then go on my way. I'm not trying to get involved in any kind of political discussion. I'm not trying to support any kind of political entities. And there may be an argument that by watching it, you are supporting it. But I also like, I think a lot of people watch it without those malicious intent. And I think that people can watch it with a good conscience. I still am kind of wading through that on my own, especially like more and more of the sport is being shifted to like the Middle East or just like countries in general. And got the whole like Russia and Chechnya kind of thing as well. There's a lot of ethical concerns. And I think as long as you think through it and you try to be as thoughtful as you can, I don't have a bad thing to say about you. I think you have the right to be able to watch and enjoy combat sports and trying to distance while still like, decrying what is going on with different human rights abuses. But it's hard when it's like, I don't want to connect myself to any political power. Like, I just want to enjoy the sport. I get that struggle. And I understand, I have my opinions and I could give you a lot of things to consider, but I also don't look down on anyone who thinks differently. The fact that they turned down this card is epic for me. I think honestly, a lot of people share your opinion. The UFC and figures within the UFC are obviously not going to put out that kind of messaging, but I wonder what kind of ripples this will have. Like, man, it's just one interesting thing about this whole Middle East thing and the growing number of fighters who are Muslim is the whole Ramadan thing, right? Like, we had UFC 300 and this Saudi Arabia card really like impacted by like a lot of the options that we have for these cards really cut down by Ramadan. So UFC 300, like I'm guessing that had an impact maybe on Bilal versus Leon. I don't know if the UFC ever considered that, but like got Bilal. You've also got Khamzat Chimaev not wanting to fight during Ramadan. That'll be really interesting to see going forward. And I think that it did have an impact. I know Ramadan starts just after the planned Saudi Arabia card, but a lot of big cards at the same time going right around the Saudi Arabia event. So it was just really hard to stack everything, which people would say that's the problem with the UFC saturation problem. Man, just drop like 2 events a year and see how that increases the quality of your events. Very interesting. What's my opinion on one's ability to shelf fighters for long periods of time? I think that that is something that fighters really need to consider before signing with one championship. It is very unfair. I listened to a podcast from Bloody Elbow with John Nash and Stephanie Haynes the other day. It was actually from a podcast from last year, but I listened to it again because they go through the whole one championship contract. And I think like I think what was it like? They guarantee offering maybe like, what was it? 5 fights in 2. It was less than the UFC, but still there was a guaranteed number of offering fights, but yeah, it just seems like they have a lot more control over when to schedule fighters. And if it doesn't meet their business needs, then they won't even reach out. A lot of fighters have voiced frustration over that. And I think that it's definitely worth considering if you're a fighter with an offer on the table for one championship. One Friday fights, no big deal. It's just a one fight deal. No harm in fighting for that. But long-term contracts, definitely worth considering for sure. Can we talk about Umar Nurmagomedov and how he is pulled out of so many fights, but his manager in the UFC broadcast keeps saying that he's being ducked? Umar is pulled out of more fights than he has had. I get that he doesn't suffer since his cousin is Khabib and he gets to hang out with Warlord Kadyrov, and his team is very well respected in their homeland. Best three fighters that have signed to fight Umar were Jack Short, Nate Woods, and Sandhagen, but he has found time to fight the mediocre part of the division. I had a debate with someone on Reddit the other day, and he said when Umar was fighting, so-and-so, his uncle died, or he hurt his shoulder. I feel that fighters fight with injuries all the time and bereavements all the time. Would you agree with my sentiment that it doesn't matter how legit your reasons are for pulling out of a fight? If a fighter doesn't consistently, it dampens the fighter's reliability, and no one is going to sign to fight someone with that track record. It's almost like, let me just look at, yeah, I don't know if you heard Khamzat Chimaev the other day, but he was like, yeah, no one wants to fight me. I'm so tired. Also, I've turned down lots of fights. And it's like, okay, you can't say that no one wants to fight you when you're turning down a lot of fights. Even if it is for Ramadan, like, that's just, it is what it is. Let's take a look here. I mean, you are right. Look at all these canceled fights. Just, was this a UFC fight? Yeah. So he has only fought 4 times in the UFC despite being signed in 2020. That one, not his fault, canceled due to coronavirus. Nurmagomedov withdrew against Wood. Nurmagomedov withdrew due to illness. That one, no reason. Sandhagen, Nurmagomedov withdrew. So yeah, I mean, like, you're right. He has withdrawn a lot of times, only fought 4 times. And man, I'm surprised I thought he had just fought in so many more times than that. But honestly, the fact that it makes me a little less mad that he's fighting the unranked debutant in Bekzat Almakhan this weekend, just because, like, dude, if you've only fought 4 times and you know, I mean, nothing against these guys, but none of these guys are ranked. I don't think they were ranked at the time. A lot of fighters fight 4, 5, 6 times among the unranked before fighting a ranked fighter. So honestly, going from Raoni Barcelos to Corey Sandhagen, that was a big jump. You know, there are fighters out there that just, they have a penchant to get injured a lot. They get sick a lot. They have bad luck. So I don't want to totally throw them under the bus here, but I do think you have to tone down the no one wants to fight me talk when a lot of your fights have been canceled too. I do agree with that. And for Khamzat too, like, everyone has reasons for not fighting, and people could say the same thing about Chimaev, like, oh, Chimaev doesn't want to fight. Well, he has this excuse of Ramadan, or he's sick, like, but someone could definitely take that as like he doesn't want to fight. So yeah, I would agree with that. I would maybe not be so strong in that, because some fighters do just get bad luck or just have bad health from time to time. There's injuries, but then there's stuff that, like, totally takes you out of a fight. You know, TJ Dillashaw, no one wants to fight with like a TJ Dillashaw kind of injury. So, yeah, that's how I feel about that. Do I find it weird that Michael Chandler is a part of the UFC defense team for the class action lawsuit, despite fighting for Bellator in the time in question and not opting out of the lawsuit? Not opting out and being a part of the defense team seems like he's suing himself, like John Nash says. That is a really weird... I think an active UFC fighter, especially, or someone within that class, that is very strange, which the class only goes until 2017. Is that right? And when was Michael Chandler? When did he sign and start fighting with the UFC? I want to say it was like maybe just after that. So he may not directly benefit from a settlement if there is one. Yeah, he signed with the UFC in 2000. Wow, just 2021. I thought it was earlier than that, but he's fought 5 times in the UFC, 2 and 3, but fought the top of the division in pretty much every fight. So, yeah, I mean, Michael Chandler, he's a company guy. I think one way you could look at it is what the UFC wants to prove in this lawsuit is that these other promotions are viable competition. Bellator and PFL, that they are viable competition. So honestly, on the one side, Michael Chandler is almost evidence that, like, look at this amazing fighter, this top tier, huge star that fought for one of our competitors. This guy who's loyal to us now is going to be able to vouch for how good the competition and how strong of a rival promotion Bellator was. At least that's probably the angle that the UFC is going to try to use there. So when Michael Chandler's contract was up, they had this back and forth between Bellator and UFC. So they're trying to present it as though there's a little bit more level playing ground between the two organizations. I think that is what the UFC is getting at. Why do I think that there's this notion that since Khabib, Islam, and Usman all come from the same camp, that they all have the same style? Even in their grappling, there are differences. Yeah, I think I am really shocked at the impact that Khabib has had on the sport. And he's got this broader family, and the truth is that so far you have to admit all 4 of those guys are ridiculously dominant. The exception would be Khabib's brother Abu Bakr Nurmagomedov, who I believe just got released from the promotion. He's like the one exception. He was very much kind of a mid-tier fighter. But those other guys, the younger guys, all of them have been exceptional talents. But you are right. Usman Nurmagomedov, much more of a developed striking game, I would say, than the other guys. Even Islam Makhachev, fairly good striking game as well. Whereas Khabib, he had a little bit, but really was just on a mission to get things to the ground as soon as possible most of the time. But you are right. Like it is just the association. It's the aura. It's not totally an aura of invincibility because there's a couple losses among all those guys, but not many, So I get it, but it is interesting how much of an aura Khabib has given to all of these guys but they're really good at the same time, for sure. Raul Rosas pulled out of his fight last minute when it came out that Tercios hadn't signed the fight yet. And after the UFC rebooked the fight, I saw fans calling Tercios a coward for not signing. Well, I thought he did sign the fight. I thought it was Rosas that wasn't able to fight this weekend. I don't understand that logic when it was Rosas who pulled out, and maybe explain this to me. No, yeah, from what I understand, Rosas got sick. UFC tried to rebook it for this weekend. Tercios was ready to show up and ready to fight at a catch weight, but Raul Rosas Jr., he just kind of said like, hey, I don't think it's meant to be. What I'm guessing is it was either like, hey, I don't think I can try to cut weight again that soon, which is totally valid, I think, or he just still wasn't feeling well. And kind of going back to the previous question, yeah, like no one's 100%, but I think if you were a fighter and like it, I don't know how bad he felt, but I think there would be a point where I felt so bad where I was just like, this is not happening. Like, I feel like I'm going to puke. I can't go out there and fight. So if that's how he felt, I don't blame him, but I don't think Tercios deserves zero blame. I think probably just fans didn't really understand the situation. There's always the thing of like, so many fans think that fighters are afraid to fight. And I literally think that fighters are afraid to fight other people like less than 1% of the time. I think it almost never happens. So, but for some reason that is a narrative. Probably last question for today. Would I compare Xiaonan as this era's Karolina Kowalkiewicz? That's a decent comparison. You know, a fighter who will always be in the shadow of the current champion since they are from the same place, as in Karolina to Joanna, as Xiaonan as to Weili. I think there are definitely some comparisons there. And I think, you know, they put Kowalkiewicz against Joanna to try and make that Poland versus Poland fight, which ended up being all right. But yeah, I think that is a decent comparison. And the official answer to that question will happen at UFC 300 on April 13th. But yeah, still really looking forward to that fight. Pretty soon here, I'll start my work on doing as in-depth of a video as I can on that fight. Really looking forward to it. I have a couple questions and I would love to dive into that and see if I can answer them. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good comparison, and even some comparisons in like their style of fighting to both good fighters, but you know, under the shadow of really dominant, really intimidating champions. I think that's a good comparison. All right, guys. Well, that does it for me. I'm peeing out. Check for my breakdown of Song Yadong versus Petr Yan tomorrow for UFC 299. And you'll see all the different ways that someone could pronounce Petr Yan. I do it in this video. As I was editing, I was like, oh my gosh, like pick a pronunciation, will you? But looking forward to the fights this weekend from Indonesia. Whatever's going to happen from UFC Vegas 87 in Saudi Arabia. Probably going to be some wacky things happening on this card. But wish the best to you and enjoy the fights this weekend.